want to continue to do that. But as you look at the larger district of which all of us are a part, could we be doing something better? Could we be looking at ministry in a different way? And could we be building or rebuilding on the solid foundations that have been given to us, not just for ourselves, but for the generations yet to come? As I was thinking about that, I came to put this devotion together from Isaiah, and I'd like to share that with you now. Years ago, when football was just beginning, teams really always stayed in their comfort zone. They just always stayed in their comfort zone. And what that meant was it was a running game because that was the rules. They always ran. It would be on dirty fields in a cloud of dust until 1906. It was always with leather helmets as well. And 3 or 4 yards, it was play between the tackles, and it was kind of who's going to be strongest. Then in 1906, there came a major development in football that kind of revolutionized the game. Anybody want to guess what that was? The forward pass became legalized, making it possible to gain not just 3 or 4 yards, but as many as 40, 50, 60, at a time. Now, during the next season that followed, after that rule was passed, do you know how many people used the forward pass? None. Not a team. It was after the first season, though, that there was another university that said, you know what, this actually could be a pretty decent thing. And it was the University of Missouri in St. Louis. First year, they switched almost entirely to the forward pass. And they beat all of their opponents that year. And this is how they outscored them. 402 points, theirs, to 11 by their opponents all season. The forward pass caught on. The Church of Jesus Christ today is facing, if you will, the 21st century in which we have got to change. There are challenges that are confronting us. And if you will, somewhere along the line, we need to find a forward pass. We've been running. We have a solid foundation, and that is Jesus Christ, the apostles, the prophets, the Word of God. But what can we do as we go into this new century, not only for ourselves to further the ministries that we have, but also to look at the generations that we are going to be handing this off to? Now, some church bodies have looked at that, and they have thought compromise might be a way to go. I'm going to tell you, if you have a scriptural truth, don't compromise, ever. That is what we are going to hold on to, and that is the basis and the foundation of why we can gather here. And I do believe that everyone gathered here believes in some necessary things. That is, Jesus Christ is the only way and means of salvation, that we look to the Word of God that is inspired and inerrant, that it becomes our foundation, not only for our own personal lives, but for the ministries that God has placed us as well. At the same time I say that, I also want us all to recognize, and I state the obvious, that our churches and our ministries need to recognize it, and some of you may not even remember this TV show. We are no longer in a Leave It to Beaver world. Anybody remember that show? Afraid to ask. Some do, some are saying, I'm not raising my hand. Okay. We need now to reach a contemporary society that is postmodern and for the first time post-Christian. We're really kind of in the early Christian era again, if you will, my thoughts. And certainly I think there's many authors that would say that. So in the process of rebuilding, I think that we need to get out of our comfort zones. And in some ways, rebuilding is more difficult than building something from scratch. Because there are some things, when you want to build brand new, it's a little easier. You just go and clear off everything and boom, you do that. When you are rebuilding and you look at some past foundations, you recognize that there's some great blessing there. But there are also some things that need to be removed. There are some habits that need to be broken. Maybe there are some hurts that need to be healed, and you go forward. Rebuilding definitely is a challenge, but it is also an exciting and rewarding adventure. And I pray that above all else that what this becomes for us today is an adventure as we work and travel together under God's guidance and blessing. Because of the times in Michigan, our families and our people and our churches and our ministries, I think we can say at least need re-examination. And I would like to stretch that to maybe some rebuilding. And if we are to rebuild successfully, it means that all of us have got to be involved together in the process. And that's what I loved about going back and reading through Nehemiah. Nehemiah is often pointed to as an architect of how to bring people together and how to work and how to have a dream and see how God will color that in and to follow what God is doing as he leads and guides and directs. But one of the things that he made abundantly clear every time he talked was, we will do this together. He'd get the people of God together. We will do this. It's us. It's not just a single individual. Nehemiah did some things to create a team spirit, and I'd like to look at a little bit of that today. And in Nehemiah 4:6, this is what the scriptures say. This is him reflecting, so we rebuilt the wall until the entire wall was joined together up to half its height. For the people of God had a will to keep working together. And I pray that that's what happens here. First of all, I'd just like to share a part of Nehemiah, what he understood as his objective and purpose. This is from Nehemiah 2. During the month of Nisan, that is April, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was set before him, I took the wine, Nehemiah was the wine steward, by the way, and gave it to the king. I had never been sad in his presence, so the king said to me, why are you sad when you aren't sick? This is nothing but sadness of heart. I was overwhelmed with fear and replied to the king, may the king live forever. Why should I be sad when the city where why should I not be sad when the city where my ancestors are buried lies in ruins and its gates have been destroyed by fire? Then the king asked, what is your request? A sigh. So I prayed to the God of heaven. First key to understanding Nehemiah, I believe, and his purpose and how he wanted to realize God's blessing was to understand a passion that he had. A passion for God, a passion for truth, a passion for following what God wanted. And God had given him a passion to see Jerusalem restored again, that the walls would be built up. He is sorrowful, not just because the walls are broken down, but because he knows they can be rebuilt again, and nothing was happening. Nehemiah had a passion for what God had put in his heart. This passion to rebuild had burned in his heart, the scriptures will tell us, for about 4 months. It was a driving factor, if you will, in his life. And so he says to the king, why should I not be sad? The city where my ancestors are buried lies in ruins and its gates have been destroyed by fire. David Clausen lists 5 reasons why people lack passion. They've allowed something precious to become familiar. And that is so true in the Christian church. We know the story of Jesus. We know he died and rose again. We know he was born on Christmas, time for celebration, but we know it. It is supposed to revolutionize us every day. You are touching a dynamis, a power of God into salvation that breaks the hardest substance known to man, and that's the sin-encrusted heart. And yet, we become tired of hearing the message. There is something wrong with us, not the message. Secondly, they want acceptance and approval. That is, those that have lost their passion. They want acceptance and approval more than godly success, because godly success generally can be tough. Thirdly, we live in a passive society that is always obsessed with political correctness. Clausen goes on to say, fourthly, apathy tends to increase with age. Someone said, as you grow older, you need to remember your passion, not just your pension. And then fifthly, often it's because we have no purpose greater than ourselves. Nehemiah's passion was so great that the king could see it on his face. He knew something was driving him, and so he asked Nehemiah. And Nehemiah's response was, and then I prayed to God. Why was Nehemiah afraid? Because the king had the power that if he didn't like your attitude or your face, you were dead. There was no questions asked. You were gone. So immediately, once that is recognized by the king, and the king asks him, there's kind of a parenthetical statement, and he says, and I prayed immediately. Yeah, I'm wondering why. Number 1 is, please don't let me die. And number 2 is, give me the words to say. I really believe that's what he prayed. So I prayed to the God of heaven. What I love about Nehemiah is that God was his first thought and not his last resort. And I'm wondering within the Christian church as well, and it may be, and I'll even say the Lutheran Church, we know that we have a great doctrine, we have a great systematic theology, we stand on the scriptures, but how often do we embrace it for all of life? And does it lead, guide, and direct us? I want to question that. Nehemiah continued. And Nehemiah answered the king, if it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor with you, send me to Judah and to the city where my ancestors are buried so that I may rebuild it. The king, with the queen seated beside him, asked me, how long will this journey take you, and when will you return? He's thought about it. He's got an understanding. He wants to charge forward. And he says, so I gave him a definite time, and it pleased the king then to send me.